All right, Simon, it is my pleasure to get us started. I'm a little bit off camera right here, but
Cool.
I am just to the side. I am so pleased to welcome you all to the very first Spike Center for Sustainability Education event. How about a round of applause?
Awesome.
So, we have combined this with Creative Climate Communication. Let's give a shout out to Creative Climate Communication students. And we have some dignitaries in the house. We have Chris Bentley, who's just off camera, who's on our board of advisors. We have Kara Carmichael, who was sitting there a minute ago. She's about to get some food. She's our Associate Vice Chancellor for Sustainability. Yeah. We have Felicia Naranjo Martinez, who's off camera, but she's also been the engine of making this all work. Yay, Spike Center. And you know Beth, and you know me.
Yeah.
Co-instructor to this class. And your dedicated connection to Antarctica. So this is Antarctica 2.0. This is Simon Steffen, who's on the line on Henri Robert's Zoom. So give a round of applause to all of those who are in Antarctica today. So we have a great schedule for you all. I printed out 10 copies, so share them around of what we got planned over the next 105 minutes. There's going to be time for Q&A. Go ahead and get a little bit of food if you want to. But really, to make the most of this experience together, Simon, maybe tell a little bit of a backstory to your connection to CU and to all of us, and then get going. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you, Max, for the warm introduction. And we'd like to extend our thank you to the Spike Center for Sustainability Education. It's an honor to be your first guests, as well as the CU Boulder series, the theater department, the environmental science department, and all the other co-sponsors. We appreciate this. We had the opportunity to do this webinar 2 years ago already. Unfortunately, last year, because of the government shutdown in the US, we weren't able to do one, but Max and myself go back now almost 20 years. We just talked about this a few minutes ago. I grew up in Boulder, and I did my undergrad at CU. And during my undergrad, I took a course called Topics in Popular Culture. Wow, Global Warming and Video Production. And Max was a guest lecturer in that course. So that's where me and Max met. I think that was in 2009. And since then, I moved to Switzerland shortly thereafter and did my master's in Switzerland. But I've been coming down here to Antarctica for, I think this is my sixth season now. And it's always a pleasure. We like to do outreach and talk to schools and different varying levels of schools as well. But it's always nice to meet with university students and of course, some professors, and extend a bit of our knowledge and what we're doing down here, as well as the renewable and sustainable aspects of our station. We are at the Princess Elisabeth station. It's a Belgian research station. It's the first and to date only zero emission polar research station. So we run completely on renewable energy. Benoit, who's actually in the tower, giving you that nice view out the window, will be talking about that. Everyone behind me and supporting is going to be presenting as well today. So we have people from the technical team, the system engineers, IT, as well as joined by 4 scientists today talking about the individual research projects. And then Henry will be kicking off. He's our science liaison officer. He'll be giving an overview. We can go to the next slide. So this is a bit of our outline. I think there is some hard copies going around in the circulation out in the classroom. But we'll be beginning with all the systems and talking specifically about the station and the renewable aspects, as I mentioned, how we produce our energy, how we use our energy, the smart microgrid, as well as unfortunately, we had to do a last minute schedule change. Therefore, Amar de Lichtenveld, he was responsible for designing our custom water treatment system a few years ago and was himself here in Antarctica for a number of seasons. Unfortunately, this year he is not present, but he was generous enough last minute to jump in and present the water treatment system, as we had a last minute change in the schedule. But Amar is an expert, so perfect guy to have along and explain this very unique and cool water treatment system that we have here on site. And yeah, so after that, after talking about the systems, we'll go into the science more so. We'll kick it off talking about the Peace Network, followed by Renette, Dr. Michel van Roosendaal from the Royal Belgian Institute for Space Aeronomy, and then concluded with Dr. Sara Wouty talking about atmospheric pathways. But I'll introduce them slightly more when we get to the science section. And then after we're done with that, I'd like to show a short little video that I actually produced. It's almost 10 years ago now, but I think it's still pertinent and applicable about how we as scientists and generally can communicate better, and some little small takeaway messages of how how we can be better communicators, which is important. Doing research is of course the main thing, but then obviously being able to relay our results and present it to not just other scientists, but for general public and policymakers, and explain it in a way that's concise and understandable for everybody is important. Otherwise, we just have very, call it, our science is, of course, nothing without being able to share it. So I think with that, I'm going to give the floor to Henry Robert, who's going to set the scene, talk about where exactly we are, as well as some of the history of the Belgian Antarctic Research Expedition, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty with all the cool sustainable aspects. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Hello, everybody. Yes, thank you very much, Simon, for the introduction, and thank you very much for having us and following us online. So my name is Henry Roberts. I am the science liaison at the International Polar Foundation. The International Polar Foundation was the builder of the Princess Elisabeth Station with Alain Hubert at the head of the Polar Foundation. And just in a nutshell, I would just like to give some facts about Princess Elisabeth Station, which is actually a yearly station. So it is actually inhabited from November to February, but it is a station that is running constantly. It is remotely accessible for all management of the station and, of course, scientific equipment data transfer. So all the system can be tweaked, as my colleague Adrien will talk to you about in a minute. And the station actually is able to welcome at least 50 scientists and people from the staff. Most of the time we are between 20 to 30 people at the station. And we have a very good ratio of scientists compared to staff member, which is quite rare among all other stations in Antarctica. So just before I enter into the subject of Princess Elisabeth Station, I would just like to quickly go over a comparison between the Arctic and the Antarctic, because it's a question that comes quite often. And as you can see on the left map of the world, we have a vision of the North Pole, which is basically a frozen sea ice surrounded by land. And the comparison between the Antarctic is striking, as the Antarctic is, of course, a real continent covered by ice and surrounded by the Southern Ocean. So with this comparison in mind, we are now diving into the Antarctic, and the gateways for us at the Princess Elisabeth Station to the Antarctic is Cape Town, because that's the closest continent. Of course, there are many stations, nearly 80 to 90 stations on the Antarctic continent, and other nations have different gateways like Punta Arenas or Rio de Janeiro, if you are closer to the Antarctic Peninsula, or Hobart if you are on the eastern side of the Antarctic. So how do we get to Antarctic? From Cape Town, we take this large cargo carrier that is able to carry up to the weight of a tractor with a very large amount of scientific equipment and up to 50 people. And this leads us to the closest landing strip that is available from Cape Town. And from this area, we take these smaller DC-3, which are from the 1940s, but which are still the most adapted type of aircraft to operate here in Antarctica because they are light. They can transport quite a bit of equipment and people, and they also can land on any type of surface because of their skis, which is very rare today. So this is where Princess Elisabeth Station is located. We are about 200 kilometers from the coast on a small chain of mountains that's called Sohr-Rondaine Mountains. And from the station, we have a radius of action of about 500 kilometers. So we can have expedition in the field quite far from the station and for extended period of time. I will go through a brief history of why do we have a station in Antarctica as Belgians. Well, it's good to know that Belgium has very long history linked to Antarctica. And actually, the very first explorer that went to Antarctica was this guy, Adrien de Gerlache, more than 120 years ago, aboard this Belgica, this ship who was actually the first expedition to be a scientific expedition in the Antarctic. And during their expedition, they got trapped in the ice, and they therefore were the first also to overwinter in Antarctica. About 60 years later, the descendants of Adrien de Gerlache was at the head of the construction of the Bois-Baudouin station that was not far away from here, about 180 kilometers close to the coast. And another 50 years later, the Belgians, during the International Polar Year in 2007-8, went back to the Antarctic and decided to build this Princess Elisabeth Station. So this station is allowing the Belgians, and of course it's international, so all the scientists from all over the world, to have an independent scientific program. Thanks to this station, we can participate to the Antarctic Climate Monitoring Network. My colleague Simon will discuss much longer about this in a few minutes. Being the first and so far the only zero emission station in Antarctica, this station is an excellent platform to test new renewable energy. And this allows us as well to promote education and perform awareness raising activities just like we're doing now. This is how Princess Elisabeth looked like at the moment. So as you can see, it is a building built on rock and suspended over the rock so the wind can blow underneath and not accumulate. And underneath the station, we have a large surface of annexes. And this shows also all the different machines and containers that we use to bring scientists in the field. This is another view of the station with the Sohr-Rondaine Mountains in the background and this big Nunatak, which is the top of a mountain sticking out of the glacier that is just 800 meters away from us. And this little drone flight shows you a little bit of the environment around which we are living. This terrace that we have just behind the station is made actually by all the snow that we push every year, and that is allowing to have a flat surface on which we put containers and all our vehicles that we use to go in the field. So we have different routes to go to our airstrip or to go to a winter park where we stored more equipment. And this shows also the extent of the glaciers that we have all around. So basically the Princess Elisabeth Station is a building that has been imagined as a passive building. That means all the energy is gained passively with the sun and the energy that we gain in our batteries. So in the summer, although the temperature outside never reach above 0 degrees, the temperature inside the station needs to be regulated, and it's always comfortable. As you see here, we are just wearing shirts normally. So our electricity, as any passive building, is produced by wind and the sun. We have a very developed sewage and water treatment system, which will be explained by our colleague Eymar de Lichtenvelde in Belgium. We have, of course, as any passive building, a very high performance insulation and double air flux exchange. As you can see on this picture, the walls of the station are made of different modules, and the thickness of each of those modules is about a half-meter thick of insulating matter. So this is the key component of having a passive building, is to have the maximum insulation as you can get, which allows us to not heat it and spare any excess of energy that we would need for something else. As you can see in this slide, that shows just the difference between a building that would be passive compared to any other building. And if you look through infrared binoculars, you would see that the station, Princess Elisabeth Station, appears as blue or a little bit of green because all the heat stays inside the building, as opposed to any other building in our cities, which are appearing red on the infrared because they are losing all their heats. And so that means that we have to constantly heat these buildings. Just to give you a little view of what the station looks like inside, so we'll do a little visit right now. This is our dining room where we take all our meals, and on the other side we have a small lounge where we can have a scientific presentation, watch a movie, or relax in the evening. Of course, the station is equipped with a fully equipped kitchen where our excellent cook is preparing all our meals and under the form of a buffet. So that's yeah, quite pleasant when we work in the cold. On the other side of the station, we have these area that are dedicated for all the engineers. These are all our office where all the systems of the station are monitored. And of course, like in any building, we have bathrooms with showers, sinks, and toilets. And underneath the station, we have these large annexes and large rooms that I was showing you on the first slide, which are composed of scientific workshop where scientists can come and prepare all their equipment before going to the field. We have storage area for the material that we use in the field. And we also have a surgery room that is allowing to keep any injured person on a stable state until that person can be evacuated from Antarctica. Luckily enough, this room has never been used, and we are putting a lot of attention to all the security, of course, here. On the other side of the building, we have garages that are heated for the maintenance of all the vehicles that we use. We have a carpentry and a workshop for metal, which allows us to build and repair anything that would need to be repaired here. When we go out in the field, the most usable vehicle that we have is the Ski-Doo. It is a light vehicle, of course, doesn't consume a lot, and it's quite fast, so we can cover quite a bit of area for scientific use, for anything else. Equipped with a sledge, we can transport a little bit of equipment. However, should you go a little bit further out in the field on the Antarctic Plateau or to the coast, a few hundred kilometers away from here, the vehicle that would be more suitable would be the Hilux that can carry much more equipment, camping gears, and scientific tools, of course. And some scientific parties sometimes go to the coast for weeks or months away from the station. So we have these large containers transformed into living containers with a kitchen, with dormitories, and even a bathroom. So those containers are dragged with these tractors. Of course, being a zero emission station, Princess Elisabeth is trying to expand this zero emission concept, and recently we had this Venturi Antarctic electric vehicle that was 100% electric and recharged by all the green energy that we have here at the station. So being a scientific platform, Princess Elisabeth Station can welcome scientists working in many different fields, including climatology. And here we have an example of an automatic weather station from the EPFL. Other scientists can study glaciology, of course, and we have big teams coming here to drill ice cores. Other scientists come to study biology. We have here snow petrel that are breeding on the close nunatak, or microbiologists, of course, who can study lichens, mosses, or invertebrates. Other scientists study meteorology or seismology. Other ones come for geology. Here we have a scientist finding meteorites that are, of course, easy to find on the blue ice, or geochemistry. So many different fields are possible to study here. Of course, Antarctica is like a huge glacier, and as every glacier, it has its danger, and the most known of it is the crevasse. So they are very difficult to find in the field and dangerous, of course. So we have training every year for every participant to go in the crevasse and learn how to extract someone should any accident happen. But once again, all the security is the top concern for us. So luckily enough, that didn't happen. And the other danger of Antarctica is the change of climate. As you know, we have very strong winds coming down from the Antarctic plateau called the katabatic winds, and they can come very fast. So if you have a very nice sunny day, it can, in a few hours, turn out into some sort of a blizzard, and if it lasts, it can bring a lot of snow, especially behind any building. So the change of weather is one of the dangers that we are monitoring very closely as well. All the weather forecasts are very well monitored to avoid being stuck in the field into this kind of weather that could eventually evolve into what we call a whiteout, where you don't see anything. It's just snow blowing and you don't see anything. So that's the danger we try to avoid. Some of the animals that we see here at the coast, of course, we are here in the one of the largest desert on Earth. Antarctica doesn't have a lot of wildlife on the continent. However, the Southern Ocean is extremely rich due to its cold temperature, its abundance of oxygen and primary production. So we have, of course, emperor penguins, Adelie penguins, some of the top predators, as we can see here, the leopard seal, Weddell seal, and in the water, orcas or humpback whales. So breeding near the station, I was mentioning the snow petrel, and that is me. I am actually a biologist, and I had the chance to come here first to study these birds that are breeding in large number here. And so, yeah, that's my presentation. This is Princess Elisabeth as it is now, and I will now give the floor to my colleague, Benoit Helleberg, for the continuation of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Move my seat down a bit. Hello, my name is Benoit Helleberg. I'm part of the engineering team here at the Princess Elisabeth Research Station, and I'll talk to you a bit more now about renewable energy. Here already in the background, you can see an image from the Nunatak with a part of our renewable energy systems. So what started off as only the station on the stilts you see in the back expanded over the years, and we added a lot of additional solar panels with turbines. So it's already 16 years since we've been here, and we're still expanding, but mostly innovating as well. And now last year we also added hydrogen into the mix for a small project that we now want to expand and to also power our backup generators. So here's the top view of our stations. You can see solar panels everywhere. We have also thermal panels, and then also a big satellite dish that's our satellite link back to Europe. Of course, here we're now nearing the end of summer, but we still have the sun that does not set. So which is peculiar because we also have vertical solar panels that power our stations. Of course, sometimes it can be overcast, or we can have a lot of wind drift, and then we count on our wind turbines. So what comes down to, so if you look at over the whole year, the biggest producer for energy is our wind turbines, because these, mainly in the winter when we don't have sun, these are the ones we count on to power our station. We do have a battery system that can cope with around 2-3 days without wind turbines and no sun. And so couple of times in the winter, we do have the backup generators working that run for the moment still on diesel, but that we are soon transforming. We have several solar thermal panels, so they heat up the water directly, so they do not provide electricity. So only in the summer we do not rely on these the backup generators. We mainly use the solar energy for then warm water and energy. So we have around 300 solar panels of the traditional type, and then 30 thermal panels and 9 small wind turbines, which are more than ample, because you do have to take in mind too that in the winter we can have very bad storms, so they have to be able to survive the winter as well. Of course, the energy throughout the year and also the summer varies. So some months we have less winds, some months we have more sun, but our grid is developed that way so that we can cope with this. At the center, at the heart of the station, we have a battery room. You can see the big overview on the right. Here we're showing an Indian group that was stranded at our station 2 years ago after their flight got into bad weather. So we're using traditional old technology, actually, lead acid batteries. Why not lithium ion? It's because in terms of fire safety, it's a lot more, there's less risk. We still keep the battery system in a fire-proof, explosion-proof room, but we do use these lead acid batteries. On the other hand, we also look at the whole life cycle of the system. So with lead acid batteries, you can almost completely recycle them. So this is a big part of being zero emission as well. So what are the main benefits of this system? So especially emissions reduction, fuel savings. You have to know we're in a very remote place. So actually the closest people to us are the people from the International Space Station when they pass by. They're at 450 kilometers in the sky. So we have to fly things in, or we have to use an icebreaker and then transport it over the several hundreds of kilometers back to our station. So what a diesel that costs €2 in Cape Town is easily 7 to 14 euros here and at our station. So this immediately comes to a cost reduction of 250,000 euro per year. And of course, it improves the air quality, which the scientists are very happy about because they have a lot of air quality sensors around. And of course, no noise, which is happy. And to give a small overview, this was a snapshot I made this morning. We were at 70% battery. Last night, it went all the way down to 50%, which is quite low, but it is getting colder, and we had a quite overcast night. We had a load of 20 kilowatts, but this can go up to 40 kilowatts easily, and no wind, unfortunately. At the moment, we're at 96% battery. What's interesting too is that a large part of the energy that we generate actually doesn't pass by the battery system. It goes straight to the consumer. And as you might know, a battery lifetime is counted in its complete load cycles. So deep discharge and then a charge again. And of course, if you freeze over your battery, or if you mishandle it by charging it too much or loading it too much, you can lower the lifetime. But it is beneficial that we do not pass by the battery system the whole time. So our consumers, a big part of our energy, this you can see here, the air handling unit, the AHU, is our energy is used for our humidifiers to humidify the air, so it's more comfortable for us because we're here at almost 1,200 meters, but with the cold and everything, the air can be very dry. And a large part of the energy is also used to melt ice and snow to create water. Which is a bit counterintuitive. A big load is also our freezer, which we're now improving by insulating. We do have because it's in the heated area, so it's easy to get in and out. We do have a freezer also outside under several meters of ice, but that's obviously a bit less handy. So what are these dump loads, which is around 30%? So all the energy besides our base load that we have in surplus, we use to heat our rooms, the hangars where we work, to have a comfortable living space. But sometimes we have too much. So our grid functions on depending on the grid frequency. So we use a standard Belgian or European grid frequency of 50 hertz, and with in 3-phase and then a single phase 230 volts. But so if we have our grid is if our frequency is too low, we're actually unloading our battery. So and that's, for instance, if we don't have wind or sun. If we have too much, we can charge the battery, but sometimes we have too much sun, too much wind, and then we actually have to derate. So we have to stop part of our sun inverters and wind inverters, which we don't like. It's also always a question: do we want more production, or but then you have this issue, or do we want less production and less consumption? So this is a big question mark for us. So talking about how we keep innovating, so we work closely together with industry. So for instance, we're now testing an instrument to have direct PV heating. And then we're also in the ideal spot to test the latest bifacial panels, because we can have the radiation from the snow. So we can actually use the panels both from the up and down. So it's ideal. So in our engineering team, we have to do extensive studies, data collection on when we have the most sun, in which time of the year, when we have the most speed, at which height, when we have the most consumption, at what time of day. And depending on that, we can choose which new turbines we will install, how many, where, and it's all quite complex. We of course welcome the help of scientists for this. For instance, last year we had a team from EPFL doing a wind study on their mast, and also comparing it to their models. And then they were using a different group was using finite element modeling to see what the turbulence was doing for our next wind turbine installations. So enough about the station. So we also help, obviously, the scientists with their expeditions on the field, and we try to improve our mobile equipment. So we have mobile laboratories, as Henri was saying, with kitchens inside, but where you also have your equipment that we improve with solar panels, small heating system. So this is a big part of our job too, and to help with the installations. So we test equipment from the industry, but we also provide feedback. And we see, for instance, now in Europe, we see a big problems with max peak load that the grid cannot provide because of all the electrification of the vehicles, of the electrical cranes. So there, colleagues of ours, they develop mobile battery systems with solar panels so that they can provide this peak power demand, and in a green and without noise, without smells. So it's used for construction sites and music festivals. Another colleague, he's working to help companies with their wastewater treatment and to use less water. Of course, we're also trying to improve our vehicles. We're looking at alternatives to the Jet A1 or improvements. And then we're now started with the first phase. We already launched 50 weather balloons with hydrogen that we have here at the station produced, which is quite successful so far. And actually, the ice in Antarctica is ideal because it doesn't have any contamination. So with a small filter, we can straight away use it to generate hydrogen in a very green way, because it's you have gray hydrogen, green hydrogen. So we have green hydrogen because it comes straight from our wind turbines and solar energy. So here you see a weather balloon launched with a 1.2 diameter. So we also help the scientists with their setups in the field. Simon will talk about that later with small solar panels and battery systems. And now I'll give the word to my colleague, Adrian.
Thank you, Benoit, and hi, everyone. In this part of the presentation, technical part, I would like to focus on two aspects of what we do at the station. First, how we consume energy, and then second, how we monitor all the systems here at the station. So, as Henri explained to you at the very beginning of this presentation, what makes Princess Elisabeth so special in the world of Polar Station, it's the fact that it's a zero emission station. All the energy we consume, almost 100%, comes from green energy. But also a good aspect of what we do as the station is how we consume that energy. And for that, we have a process that we call the microsmart grid. What it is, it's actually a process where all the energy that is produced and loaded, there will be a mechanism that assess what device needs it the most according to a ranking hierarchy we established, and then we'll provide energy to those systems and devices in priority. So on one side, you have production of energy, always coming from wind turbines, solar panels, and in very few moments from generators. And on the other side, you have all the systems at the station. And in the middle, you will have what we call a programmable logic controller, a PLC, that will at every time try to assess what system needs it the most according to the priority we set. At the top of these priorities, we of course have all the safety equipments, being able to provide medical care, being able to extinguish a fire in case there is one, being able to provide to the station's daily operations like water treatment, melting water to make sure we always have drinkable water, but also ventilation to make sure we breathe a good air. And then, of course, third very important aspect of energy supply is all the science equipments, which is still the core business of Princess Elisabeth. We want to make sure that the energy we have is enough to make the devices work at full operations. And then at the down of the scale, we have everything related to the daily life that is not mandatory, like taking a laundry, for instance, or going to the internet. What does that mean? It means that although the system is smart and will always provide energy in the best way possible, it also means the energy is not unlimited. And so when there are days without wind or sun, we will have to restrict some of our actions. Mainly, we won't take a laundry, we won't take a shower, and then, of course, we won't spend the day scrolling on Instagram or TikTok because that could harm systems that really needs energy to function. So that's how we consume energy in a smart way, let's say, at the station. So how does that translate into the day-to-day life of a technician here at the station? Well, as I said, we have the PLC, which is kind of the brain of the station. And then on top of that, we have computer software called SCADA, which is a visual interface that allows us to monitor live all the systems and the relevant data to make sure we make informed decisions in case we have to do. Yeah, what you see here is a typical SCADA screen. So the user interface really feels like we are stuck in the 90s, but trust me, it's very useful. Some of the screens, are just numbers that we can assess as technician and say, okay, here we have enough current, there we don't have. But most of the screens we have are like this one. So for instance, for the water treatment system, we try to mimic as much as possible the physical reality of the systems and to show on the screen all the relevant data that is needed to understand how the system works and if we have to make decisions. Because although the system is autonomous, there is always room for human interaction, for instance, by changing parameters via the screens, or if needed, to go downstairs and activate a valve or close it. That's always possible. So yeah, and we have this for all of our systems. So we talked about the water treatment, but you also have for air handling units that Benoit mentioned. We have that for everything. So the SCADA is really for us like a digital twin that we can use to monitor our systems and decide whether we can make intelligent actions. That's a bit the big picture, but now my colleague Emar will go deeper into one of our most important systems, which is the water treatment one. Emar, I give you the floor.
Thank you, Adrien. Hello, everybody. My name is Emma Dekterveld. I'm a process engineer and I've been working with the Polar Foundation for the last 7 years, 8 now, and mainly with the water production and water the treatment systems. And I will today explain a bit about how we manage both the drinking water and the wastewater at Princess Elisabeth. You can go to the next slide. So, first of all, some motivation. Why do we pay attention to water when we are surrounded with snow? In this presentation, I will try to convince that it is worth it to look after our water, and I will also show you some of the challenges we face while doing so. Our motivation comes from the very pristine environment that surrounds us and our zero emission goal. We don't want to release untreated sewage into the environment. And so that's why we have a wastewater treatment system that enables us to purify the wastewater. This also brings some benefits, like the fact that we can treat the organic waste on site, reduces the need for exporting this waste out of Antarctica and hence the carbon footprint. Also, we can reuse the purified water because it is quite clean. And so this also brings a number of advantages, which I will explain. Next slide. So before we go into the details, I will show you now the water cycle at the station. So that's an overview of the water cycle at Princess Elisabeth. First, we produce our fresh water using the very pure snow that we have around us, and we obtain then meltwater. This meltwater is then converted into drinking water and domestic hot and cold water. These fresh waters are being used in our appliances for everyday's life and collected as black and gray wastewater. So black water, as you might know, is the water from the toilets. So it's mixed feces and urine, a bit of water, and gray water is water from showers, laundries, dishwasher, kitchen, everything else. The real challenge is to treat the black water, and not many stations in Antarctica thrive to do so. Once we have collected these two black and gray water, we feed them into our water treatment unit, which then produces the purified water and some activated sludge, that's bacteria that we have to deal with. This purified water we can then recycle in part and safely discharge to the environment in another part. Next slide. So about the water production and distribution, so for the technical minds in the audience, these are the installations that we use. On the top, you can see some solar thermal panels, which have a great efficiency here in Antarctica for producing heat. And then on the left corner, you can see the snow melter in which we dump the snow. Some water storage devices, very useful to have some buffer capacity for both water and heat. And then on the right, we have all the classical appliances. Next slide. Now we will watch a short clip of how we produce meltwater from the snow.
On 4 mètres cubes de neige pour faire 1 mètre cube d'eau.
Yeah, you can maybe cut the
Donc,
as it is
si
in French.
on met 5 donc x4, ça va faire 6.
Yeah. So you see this the snow melter is this insulated tank in which we put the snow and then we melt it to very pure meltwater. Yeah, what I'm saying here is that a big part of running those systems is to pay attention to our consumption. And so at Princess Elisabeth, we use about 50 to 55 liters per person per day. And that's actually quite low if we compare it to, let's say, Europe, where it is 3 times that. And even in the US, I think it's about 300 to 400 liters, so like 100 gallons per person per day. And so the fact that we consume less water is a big ingredient in the general success of our water management strategy. But now let's get back to the drinking water. You might wonder, why do we have to treat water that comes from snow that is so pure? In fact, the water we have after we melt the snow is too pure. It is too pure to be drunk because it lacks the essential minerals such as calcium and magnesium. So the only thing we do is to dose tiny amounts of them to make sure that we respect the World Health Organization guideline for drinking water. Then we also put a little bit of chlorine just to make sure that it is disinfected and safe to use. The cool thing about it is that we can tune the system, and so we can really choose what mineral profile we want, and so what taste we want. And so we tuned it to have the same taste of a famous Belgian water that we sometimes drink in Belgium. That's the cool thing about it. You can go to the next slide. Now, the biggest challenge is not drinking water production, it's wastewater treatment. And that's what we are going to focus on in the next minutes. So on the left, you can see black water sample and gray water sample. And basically what we do is that we combine these two into a biological treatment process. And then the only outputs we obtain are on the right-hand side of the slide. You can see this kind of muddy, earthy earthy. It's actually dried matter. So that's the organic waste that we obtain at the end of the process. And then you have purified water. You can go to the next slide. So how does it work? I won't go too much into the details, but here you have a general process flow diagram of the system. So on the left, you have the buffer tanks for black and gray water, some pre-filtration, and then we have an anaerobic digestion step to kill all the pathogens pre-digest the matter. Then some filtration, and then we have at the center the masterpiece of the system, which is the bioreactor, in which microorganisms will use oxygen to oxidize the organic matter, and they will eat virtually everything. And then at the end of the system, we have some more filtration, finer filtration, so that we can keep all those bugs in the system. And then a few polishing steps with activated carbon and chlorine. So then we are sure that we have a very pure purified water. Next slide. This is how it looks like in practice. Well, first as a drawing. So when we commissioned the system about 3 years ago, we first had to, of course, engineer it and model it. And then you can go to the next slide. And this is how it looks like in reality with my colleague Nicolas. We had just commissioned the system, and we were very happy about it. Here are some more pictures. Of course, I won't explain everything. If you have questions, you'll have to wait for the Q&A. These are the control screens. As Adrien explained, it's a very important part of operating the station, and especially for this system because it takes a bit of expertise to understand the biology and everything. And this operator screen enables me to give advice and operational tips from 15,000 kilometers away. And it enables me to stay home for Christmas, to say it like that. You can go to the next slide. Now, some quick numbers. So last season, we produced about 115,000 liters, half of which was recycled water and half of which fresh water or meltwater. Next slide. And in terms of wastewater, we have also half and half, almost black water and gray water. We also have a bit of sludge. So sludge is a combined community of microorganisms that do the job, but at some point we have too much of it, so we have to deal with this excess. And on the right, you can stay on the slide. Yeah, on the right you can see a comparison of two water samples. On the left is the black water that we feed into the system, and on the right is the purified water that comes out of the system. So you can see there's quite a difference in quality. You can go to, so this is about the management of this sludge. I won't go into details, but we have a process called flocculation that is quite handy to dewater this sludge, because most of it is water, and we don't want to ship out water, so we can dry it. And you can go to the next slide. And to dry it, we after flocculation, we use this dryer, this sludge dryer table, in which we use renewable energy to really get all the water out, and then we obtain this final organic waste, which is dry inert matter. And here is a picture of Simeon, who's responsible for the system on site. And he was very happy to share this picture, because the green bag he has under his feet is the only waste he collected from operating the system for 3.5 months. So that was just 15 kilograms of dry matter out of those 100,000 liters of wastewater. So in terms of volume reduction, of waste reduction, it's quite effective. You can go to the next slide. Now, a bit about energy use, because of course this also costs some energy, and we are trying every year to optimize the energy consumption. On the left, you can see the energy cost of meltwater. So as you know, melting snow costs a lot of energy, because you have this phase transition between solid to liquid. So that's about 170 kilowatt hours per cubic meter. And then on the 3 bars on the right, these were different years of operating wastewater treatment systems at the station. The first, the second bar was with the previous generation, about 100 kilowatt hours per cubic meter. And then we got it down to 70 and then 35 last season. And yes, and now this is a very important comparison. Since we can produce highly reusable purified water, we can decrease the overall energy cost of producing water. As you can see on the left, when we don't treat water, we just have to pay the energy cost of producing the water from the snow. If we produce water and treat it without reusing it, then we have the costs that add up. And then if we reuse the water that we have purified, then we can decrease the total energy cost even lower than if we had no treatment. So in other words, we can cancel out the energy expenditure of treating wastewater by reusing the purified water. Okay, yeah, you can go next slide. You can skip this one. Yeah, sorry, go back one slide. Yeah, thank you. So to come back to the goals I had shared with you in the beginning of the presentation, we indeed respect the zero emission goal because we don't release raw CUH into the environment. We have about 99.9% of the waste that is being treated on site, and we can calculate that we use 6 times less energy to recycle water than to produce new water, as I just explained. You can go to the next slide. I will go very quickly here. So, of course, this comes with some challenges. We face cold temperatures, which means that we have to empty the full installation every year. This is a lot of work. I really commend the plumbers and the operators on site who are doing a great job with that every year. We also have to pay attention to the energy use and the availability of energy because it's a renewable energy power station. We face some technical complexity due to the automation and all the sensors and instruments we use. And finally, since we are very isolated, technical expertise becomes a very scarce and critical resource. Yep, and to finish, yes, these are some take-home messages. So we really want to emphasize that it can be done, even in the harshest places and the most remote places on Earth. You can have this energy and water autonomy, and to help achieve this goal, water treatment and reuse is instrumental. It's not something that you have to do on top of it. It's really part of our general energy and water philosophy at the station. And finally, all the technology is available off the shelf, but a shift in the behavior is sometimes needed to achieve these goals. Thanks for your attention.
So we're going to dive into the science section now. We have 14 scientific projects running at the station this season. A lot of these can run autonomously, so that not somebody has to be on site all the time, which is nice. And we're going to focus on 4 specific projects for the rest of the presentation. I'm going to kick it off with the automatic weather stations, the PEACE network. It stands for one of the cooler names in science, the Princess Elisabeth Antarctica Climate Experiment. And then that will be followed by Renette, who is going to be from the EPFL Institute, University in Switzerland. She'll be talking about snowflux, followed by Dr. Michel van Roosendale, talking about observing. He's from the Bira Institute in Brussels, and he'll be talking about ozone composition here in Antarctica. And then our final presenter will be Dr. Sarawati, talking about atmospheric pathways and how fine particles end up here in Antarctica. All right, so as I mentioned, I'll be talking about automatic weather stations. I already mentioned the cool acronym, and then more so at the end, I'll be zooming out a bit more big picture, talking about surface mass balance and repercussions of a warming world. So as Henry already mentioned, we're going to repeat slide here, but this gives you a bit of an idea of where we're located in Antarctica, roughly 200 kilometers from the Droning Maudlin coast. And this is in the East Antarctic ice sheet. The Antarctica is typically broken into 2 sections. We call it the East Antarctic ice sheet, which is the larger, more dominant ice sheet here on the right. And then the West Antarctic ice sheet, which is here on the left. And these are separated by the Transantarctic mountain range. That splits not quite in half, but it's a large dominant mountain range just here, beginning and going up. So East Antarctica is the bigger one, as you know, and it's also very thick. It's up to 3 miles thick in its biggest place, almost 4.8 kilometers. And I was actually pretty shocked by how big Antarctica was. I was actually just Googled this number earlier, and for comparison, so Antarctica is 5.2 million square kilometers, or 14.2 million square kilometers, 14.2 million square kilometers, 5.2 million square miles. For comparison, the US is 3.8 million square miles with Alaska, without Alaska, 3.12 million square miles. That means Antarctica is 40% larger than the continental US without Alaska. So that's pretty shockingly large, in my opinion. Renette agrees. But obviously, because Antarctica, the East Antarctic ice sheet is so thick and large, it is hardly ever above freezing. The Antarctic plateau is at over 2,500 meters elevation. So we don't experience much surface melt here as we do, especially in the West Antarctic ice sheet or in Greenland. We do have iceberg calving, but because it's so big and thick, we'll get into that later, but there's actually not so much melt going on the surface, but there is other ways. So to dive into the automatic weather stations, these are important because, of course, with a 5.2 million square mile ice sheet, we can't pepper the entire place with automatic weather stations, but they are a key component of being able to calibrate and have ground truthing stations on the ice sheet, which work in tandem and in unison with the remote sensing with the satellites that are constantly overpassing Antarctica and the rest of the globe, which then you can work in tandem. And these single point measurements can be more accurate, and then they work together with the satellites to do which do a lot of the observations and monitoring of the ice sheet itself. So as I guess a pretty popular topic in the US right now, this is obviously not a map of Antarctica, but of Greenland. I bring this up because the Greenland Climate Network was actually started in 1990 by this guy. That was actually my dad. He was a professor at the University of Colorado for over 20 years. And he started the Greenland Climate Network in 1990 before we really saw a warming signal in the Arctic. So it really is kind of the longest running data set that we have on the Greenland ice sheet, which then this whole network got taken over by GEUS, which is a research institute in Denmark, which is great. Obviously, Greenland belongs to Denmark, so they get continuous funding every year from the government, so they don't have to continue constantly write proposals, which is great. Most importantly, this long-running data set continues. And then Connie was also the one that installed the first two weather stations here, part of our Peace Network in the 2012-13 season. So now transitioning back down to the south, this is now an overview of our call it network of automatic weather stations. The first two, we are located here at the Princess Elisabeth station. This was the first station that was installed back in 2012. My dad then installed the second station here behind the Soranden mountain range on the Gunnerstock Glacier. I came for the first time the following year in 2013-14, and then added one at called AWS Blue. It's on a blue ice field where you have the International Airfield. And then in 2021, I was actually able to recycle quite a lot of the equipment from the GCNet once GEUS had set up their own automatic weather stations. So we were able to get a lot of the equipment and reuse it down here. And then we've been steadily expanding our network over the past few years. This station down here, AWS L0, it's on an ice rise close to the coast. And PE PUP, that stands for Plateau Upper, were installed in the 2021 season. And then more recently, in the last few years, we've added this station here on the grounding line. This is where the ice sheet meets the ocean and starts floating on the ocean itself. And that's part of Dr. Eric Rigno's project from the University of California, Irvine, as well as this 8 RBI station, 40 kilometers out on the ice shelf. So these are large floating pieces of the ice sheet floating on top of the ocean, which extend for up to about 80 kilometers. And then these orange spots are where we'd like to install a couple more stations, most likely next season. This is just going to give you a quick little view of setting up a station. This is the PUP station that we installed in 2021. And this is the most southerly station in our network. So this is at almost 2,500 meters elevation. And we'll get a little view of the data later, but the last 2 years, the average temperature at this location has been minus 30 degrees Celsius. So obviously here we don't experience pretty much any surface melt at any time of the year because of its high elevation. But yeah, for the sake of time, we're just going to continue. Here is a nice overview of, and don't be shocked, this is a static snow height sensor. Oh shoot, one thing I did forget, actually. Sorry, I'm going to backtrack really fast. On our automatic weather stations, we typically have all our stations are equipped with two of each sensor in case one were to fail. Or we also going to build a little profile so they come equipped with the temperature and humidity sensor, of course, as well as thermocouples, which also measure temperature, shortwave, incoming and reflected radiation sensors. Some stations are equipped with the net radiation sensor, which can take into account long wave radiation as well. Sonic snow height sensors, which sends out an acoustic signal, and then it measures how long it takes for the signal to come back. And you know if the surface is the surface height, so you know if it's accumulating or melting at a location. Of course, we have birds too, or anemometers. Those measure wind speed and direction. And then all of our stations are powered by solar panels, and our battery boxes. We typically have two 12-volt batteries, which power the station throughout the year, and those are buried in the snowpack. Back to where we were, all of our stations are also connected via satellite communication. We use an SPD Iridium communication to transmit all of our data in real time via satellite to our servers in Amsterdam. Yeah, this is not a shocking melt event. I was just down at the station 5-6 days ago, so we had to raise the station. Some stations are in accumulation areas, so we have to raise them every few years. Here, you can select which station, so all 8 or 9 of our stations are obviously online, and then we can display our data like that. This is available to anybody with a login. So if anybody is interested in data, you can let me know, but we'll get to that point in a minute. So obviously we have all of our parameters displayed here, and then you can also choose the time range. For example, looking back 2 years or 5 years or 10 years or 13 years for the longest stations that have been operating. So that really allows us to have a nice interface to work with. This also makes us not be blind. So when we're going out in the field to service our stations, we know if something isn't working, it needs to be replaced. And as you can see here, this is the average temperature of the last 2 years at the plateau upper at minus 30 degrees Celsius. I'm going to keep going. Oh, I think this is maybe the thing. Yeah, so we're in communication with the University of Wisconsin and the Meteorological Antarctic Center for data. I can't see the thing on the right side of my screen, but the AMRDC. So they're going to be hosting our data on their server, which will be great, which will be open access, and then anybody can have access to our data. To go a bit more big picture, of course, this isn't captured really by AWS alone, but why really are we interested in this in proving or monitoring the climate? So this is showing the surface mass balance of the Antarctic ice sheet over the past 20 years. So on average, it's losing about 135 gigatons of ice per year. It's 135 billion tons of ice each year. These orange red regions are areas where you're losing lots of mass in meters and water equivalents. This is -6 meters, which is crazy amount of melt. This might be, some of you guys might have heard of the Doomsday Glacier or the Thwaites Glacier. This is located here in the Amundsen Sea Embankment. And this glacier alone is losing about 50 gigatons or 50 billion tons of ice each year. These blue regions are actually we're gaining a bit of mass. That's why we are in a unique region. We are located up here, not over my own face, but in East Antarctica. So that's why it's a unique location, which we will see here. This is pretty much showing the same thing, but from a research paper in 2020, these 3 graphs are showing. So this one was where Doomsday Glacier is called it, where a large section of the ice sheet's actually pushed below sea level. So you have warm water currents getting in and melting the water, melting the glacier. That's why it's also scary that they say that most likely this glacier is going to keep retreating and retreating quicker because the water has made its way in underneath where the ice sheet is actually grounded. So it's kind of irreversible, they say. So that's melting quickly. As you can see, other end, this is the Antarctic Peninsula, also negative mass balance here as well in East Antarctica. But we're located up here. in the Queen Maud Land area, and very uniquely, one of the few regions I think anywhere in the world where we're actually gaining ice. So we're actually gaining mass in this location, which is great from a global perspective, because I'll continue in terms of how much ice we're losing globally. It's quite shocking. So this is also going bigger picture, but also incorporating Greenland for the Arctic. So there was more of an earlier onset of melt in the Arctic. That's why Greenland has lost about 5,000 billion tons of ice. This is only until 2020, so even more so now over the last 20 years. Antarctica started later, but is also now losing more and more ice. So this is, of course, relates, if we lose ice, then it also raises sea level. So if we lose ice here, all that melts into the ocean and starts accumulating. So in the last 25 years, we've already gained 10 centimeters of sea level rise on average. It's not the same throughout the world, but for a visualization, I talked about, so Antarctica was losing 145 gigatons of ice on average per year. Greenland is around 250 to 300 gigatons of ice. If you equate that, sounds like a big number, but what does that mean, right? So a gigaton of ice, this represents 1 gigaton, or 1 billion tons of ice. That's one kilometer and 1 kilometer and 1 kilometer. If you were to put that over the Smithsonian Mall in Washington, D.C., it would fill up the entire mall times four times as high as the monument, making up the end of the mall. To look at it, another way to think about it, 9,000 tons of, or 300 gigatons of ice every single year is the equivalent to losing 9,000 tons of ice every single second throughout the year. So you're losing the equivalent of, let's say, 4,500 elephants every single second continuously. And that's just from Greenland alone. And we're losing also 150 gigatons roughly from Antarctica. So together you're losing about 13,500 gigatons, or 13,500 tons of ice per second throughout the year. Sounds a little scary. I don't want to make it sound so negative, but there is something that we can do about it. The solutions are here. We just have to work together and fix the problem.
The other thing is that if you transition to this carbon-free energy, you create jobs, you create cleaner energy, you create more efficient cars, more efficient homes, more efficient everything, cleaner air. It's a win-win situation. The difficulty is for people to be convinced we need to change.
The thing is, the technology is here. Like, we could take a turn. There's everything available now to transition. Jimmy Carter had solar panels installed on the roof of the White House in the late 1970s. The next president was a Republican. What was the first thing he did when he showed up in the White House? Ripped the solar panels off the White House. So if we would have transitioned to a green economy in the 1970s, you honestly would not be talking to me. My father probably would never have started the Green Climate Network. I mean, if we would have transitioned in the 70s, we would be so far ahead where we are now. It would be a minute problem opposed to like a catastrophic problem. Well, wasn't the most rosy message, but at the same time, there is still, I think, something we can do. And as long as we work together, and I think we can still overcome this problem. We just have to start transitioning much quicker away from fossil fuels. Then, of course, a different president would also be helpful. But with that, I'm going to pass it on and give the floor to Renette. Thank you.
Hi all, I'm Renette Engbers. I'm a PhD student at EPFL. It's in Lausanne, Switzerland. And I'm here now for a month to study the effects of blowing snow on the Antarctic boundary layer. And just for you to have a small idea of what blowing snow looks like, I have some videos here, unfortunately not made by me, because it's been incredibly cold this season. They're from the first located here where there's a bit more wind than at the station. So Simon already introduced the topic of the surface mass balance of Antarctica. So why I study blowing snow is because it's an important part of the Antarctic surface mass balance, which is not yet well incorporated in models or in measurement systems. And the surface mass balance includes different processes, for example, precipitation of snowfall. Then we have the redistribution of snow via erosion and deposition. We have melt, and this is mostly at the coasts. It's only surface melt, and it doesn't include any basal melt of the ice sheet, so it's a bit less high numbers of melt than Simon just showed. Then we have the refreeze of this melt water in the snowpack. And then we have the sublimation of snow, which accounts to about 10% of the total precipitation, which removes 10% of the total precipitation on the Antarctic ice sheets. And this sublimation is both blown snow sublimation and surface sublimation. So let's see, for example, when there's wind on the Antarctic ice sheet, which blows cold and dry air over the surface, which is moist, which has snow, there will be a moisture transport, moisture flux from the surface to the atmosphere, and this is sublimation. This uses energy, so we need energy for the phase change from solid state snow to water vapor, and this cools the surface. When we have strong winds and blowing snow, there will be additional snow surface, which will allow for more sublimations from the snow crystals. This leads to increased sublimation from the blowing snow, which leads to increased water vapor in the atmosphere, which creates a negative feedback with the surface sublimation. And this is not yet well understood and studied, and that's why my PhD project now is to investigate these mixing parameterizations during blowing snow events and see if they are still valid in these cases. And an additional question sorry, the video keeps playing, is these blowing snow clouds, they act like clouds in the atmosphere, but on the surface. And as we might all know, clouds emit long-wave radiation, which blowing snow particles also do. This long-wave radiative effect is not included in many models, and we are here to understand more of how to include this in models currently. So how do we do this? We have located here, just 100 meters from the station, a 26-meter tall tower with 5 vertical levels of instruments. And some are the same instruments that Simon already introduced, which are typical on automatic weather stations. So it measures relative humidity and temperature, wind speed and direction, surface temperature, 4 components of radiation, so long wave, short wave, upward and downwelling. And in addition to that, we also measure snow particle count and snow mass flux passing by our instruments. We have this also at 4 different heights, so we can measure the density of the blowing snow cloud and the height. In addition to this, we have high frequency measurements, which measure with 10 measurements a second. So it's a lot of data. And this measures the 3 component wind velocity, temperature, and moisture content, with which we can measure the latent heat flux and the sensible heat flux, if for the people that know a bit about the surface energy balance. What does the fieldwork here involve? So it's a bit of climbing in this 26 meters tall mast, but it's mostly a lot of working with cables. It's not what you would expect from fieldwork in Antarctica, but it's a big part of it. Then the data we obtain, the MAST is here year-round. It measures year-round, and it was instrumented throughout multiple years. And last year, a lot of measurements were added, and now I collected all the data. So I have a bunch of data to process. I show here some data of a blowing snow event in the gray, in between the gray shadow area, where you see at the top the temperature of the surface and the air, the wind speed, which has increased to 20 meters per second at 16 and 26 meters height, the mass flux measured by different instruments, and below the latent heat flux. So positive means sublimation and negative means deposition. And I show here in blue what the instruments, the high frequency instrument measure, which is direct measurements of latent heat flux, which measures the sublimation, and parametrization, which models also use to measure the latent heat flux in red. And you see that during this blowing snow event, the models or the parametrizations models use actually underestimate what we measure exactly. With the new data we have now, with the additional instruments, we create high vertical resolution profiles to better understand what is happening higher up as well. And this is all with the ultimate goal to improve blowing snow representation in regional climate models to obtain better estimates of the total Antarctic mass balance. So this was it, and I will give the floor to Sarah. Michel, pardon.
Okay, so let's move from the surface to the atmosphere. And my name is Michel van Roosendaal from the Belgian from the Belgian Institute for Space Aeronomy, and I'm going to talk about the ROMA project, which is about ozone measurements in Antarctica. And this is a project that is supported by the Belgian science policy. It involves two federal research institutes, BIRA and the Met Office. And it is coordinated by my colleague Alexis Merlot from BIRA, and we also have a stakeholder committee, which is basically involving some of the key researchers in ozone monitoring in the world. So as you all know, the ozone layer is essential for life on Earth. And this is because, of course, as you know, ozone is protecting us from the high energy radiation emitted by the sun. And for this reason, of course, ozone has been monitored for a very long time in a continuous way by different techniques. And just as an illustration, you can see here an animation of the evolution of the famous ozone hole, which is developing each and every year above Antarctica during the spring period, September, October. And this animation was created using the Tropomi instrument, which is also in our community a very famous instrument launched on the Sentinel-5 precursor mission from the European Copernicus program. So, of course, ozone is monitored by satellite instruments. They provide global coverage, and one might ask the question, why do we still need to measure from the ground if satellites are measuring already globally? And there are several reasons for that. First, that satellite instruments, of course, they provide global coverage, but they are also suffering from several challenges. They are sensitive to clouds, and they can have issues with degradation in time. Also, satellites are very carefully calibrated initially when they are launched, but they can drift in with the years. They can have degradation again, and this has to be monitored. So long-term verification using reference ground-based observation is really critical to maintain the accuracy of the ozone monitoring. So this project is essentially about trying to assess new reference systems for ground-based monitoring of total ozone. And basically what we want to do is to assess whether new systems to measure total ozone, and namely the Pandora and the BTS, I will come back to these instruments, whether they fulfill the requirements to become the new standards for total ozone measurements in polar region as established by the WMO. So what we want to do is basically to operate two of these new candidate instruments, the Pandora instruments and the BTS, the solar instruments, together or next to the currently established instruments for ozone measurement, which is the Brewer instrument. So basically operating these three systems next to each other, assessing these instruments with respect to the accuracy of the ozone measurements, but also with respect to their ability to sustain the very harsh conditions in Antarctica. So this is the main objective, but we also have two secondary objectives in the project. And the first one is to use this data that we are going to collect to validate a number of satellite instruments that are operated currently in space, and also to work more on developing experimental retrievals that can be done using the same instruments to derive additional species that are important to characterize the chemical states of the stratosphere under ozone hole conditions, and so that will help us to basically interpret the ozone observations. So this is the schedule of the project. So we are at the beginning of the project, and my task here at the station is to install a Pandora instrument at the station. Next year we will come with a second instrument, the BTS, and in 2027 we will operate the three instruments next to each other during a full year before the installation in 2028. So this is a 3 years project funded as it is. So the Pandora instrument, I don't go into the details. This is a quite well-known instrument in our community. Although it is relatively new, it was developed at the end of the year 2010. So it has basically something like 10 years of developments. And this is a commercial system operated in a large-scale global network. But specifically for this project, it has been upgraded with a specific heating kit that was developed really for operation at the station. And so this new development will be kind of a test for future operation in the global network. And this is based on previous operations at with the similar instruments at also polar stations. So we have installed this instrument in early January, and you can see a picture of it on the left side. So this is the Pandora with its upgraded heating kit, which is basically the black component that you see on top of the instrument. And this is operated next to the Brewer instrument. So the instrument is ready to be compared with the Brewer system in the next months. It will be operated for the full winter season, hopefully. So in summary, this project ROMA aims at testing new systems for ozone monitoring under polar conditions. Measurements will be conducted during 3 seasons, not with the 3 systems, but we will operate during 3 seasons with the Brewer and the Pandora. Although the station is, as you know, only occupied during a limited period of time in summer, measurements will be performed continuously and also during polar night. And there, with the Pandora instrument, we will exploit the moon as a light source to derive total ozone. So the 3 systems will be intercompared and also used for satellite validation. And we will also, which is also interesting for us, work on experimental retrievals of 3 chemical species that are important to better characterize the chemical state of the stratosphere, especially during spring at the station. And with this, I thank you, and I will give the floor for the last presentation of today for Sarah.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Sarah Woti. I have a PhD in glaciology, and I'm now a postdoc position in the laboratoire G-Time. And today, to finish this part of scientific talk, I'll discuss with you about the tracing the origin and transport of atmospheric dust in coastal East Antarctica. And this is within the Passepartout project, which is a joint effort of 3 Belgian universities and the Royal Meteorological Institute of Belgium. Passepartout stands for Pathways of Particles, VOCs, and Moisture into East Antarctica in a Changing Climate. And it aims to investigate the relationships between the weather regimes, the circulation atmospheric patterns, and also the geochemistry of inorganic, but also from organic compounds in East Antarctica. But why do we care about these? Because they are major elements from the Antarctic climate system. For example, we know that the aerosols, they have a key role in the clouds because they are cloud condensation nuclei, so they play a role in the microphysics. And in turn, clouds are a super important agent because they link the evaporation of water vapor from the tropics to precipitation in Antarctica. But what we don't know is in Antarctica how the interaction between clouds and atmospheric particles works, but also the atmospheric transport and the transformation pathways of these particles. So that's where we are now. And I'm going to show you, for example, here distribution of PM 2.5, which are particulate matter that are have a diameter of 2.5 micrometers or less, so really fine particles, which means they have smaller sedimentation rates and they stay for longer in the atmosphere, and they can be transported on way bigger distances, and that's how they reach Antarctica. And that's what is interesting for us in this project. I'm focusing on my part of the project on these small atmospheric particles that we call dust, and we want to know where they come from, how they arrive to Antarctica, and how they impact the climate and the environment in Antarctica. And to do that, we work with what we call REE, rare earth elements, which are a special part of the chemical composition with their concentration not affected by mineral alteration, which means that the dust composition, their concentration doesn't change from the source area where they are emitted to where they are deposited in Antarctica, which means we really have a consistent signature between these potential source areas and where they arrive. So these potential source signatures are super important for us if we want to know where the dust comes from. And we analyzed more than 200 places in the southern hemisphere to have what we call the potential source signature as ensemble. And we have identified 5 main regions: South America, Southern Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and also the local sources. Like we said here, we have a few nunataks around, and they can also influence the dust deposition in our coring system. But also these regions, as you can see, can be pretty big. So this means that there are more than just 5 source areas. For example, South America, we have really different signal if we go to Patagonia or if we go northern in the northern Puna and Altiplano region. So where do we go to study these dust that arrive in Antarctica? We go to the Lockeregan ice rise, which is the ice rise really north of the Princess Elisabeth station, above around 200 kilometers from here. And we dig 2 trenches that you see here with my colleague Sibyl, and we dig trenches that have kind of the depth of a year of accumulation. For that, we use the Simon AWS data, but also models data. And we sampled a few levels of snow, and we get 10 liters bottles for each level, which is a lot of water. We have like 4 or 5 liters of water to filtrate, because we need kind of a lot of matter to be able to measure it, and then there's not much dust in Antarctica. And you can see here our filtration system, kind of easy system, and then we get some dust on the filter that you can see on the bottom picture, and then we measure these. The first we attack it with some big acids treatments, and then we measure it by ICP-MS, and that's what the results that you see on the right side is the REE signatures from the same trench. So you see already that they have kind of different type of patterns and signals, which points us towards different types of sources depending on the time of the year. And how do we get these information? So as I told you, we have lots of potential source areas, area patterns, and then we use a statistical model. I'm not gonna go into detail, but with multiple linear regression, we put them all together to see how to combine them to best fit the area pattern of the sample. And that's what we did for one of the trench that I can show you here. So on the x-axis, you have the depth. And so this means different time period of the year, and you can already see that the composition and the contribution of the different source areas are really different from time to time. We see that the Patagonia is a really big source, but also the local sources in gray, but also Australia and New Zealand. So that's really important and interesting results, meaning that there might be differences in the atmospheric pathways followed by the air masses depending on the season of the year. So yeah, perspective, we have now 3 consecutive years on this local region ice rise because we just sampled the last the snow trenches. So we will be able to analyze the interannual variability of the atmospheric pathways followed by the air masses, but also maybe identify some seasonal patterns and maybe also see some differences in the deposition between the 2 pits that we analyze on the local region ice rise. Thank you for your attention.
We only have about 5 good minutes. Questions from the group? Yes, please, Veronica.
Do you guys have contact with other stations in Antarctica? And if so, like, how much do you guys communicate and what about? Like, do you guys share data or is it pretty independent between the stations?
I can answer the beginning part of that question. So part of the Antarctic tree, technically all science that takes place in Antarctica should be openly shared and publicly available. So any science that takes place here, is available and should be shared with anybody that's interested in that data. Henry, maybe you know a bit better about how much communication between other stations. As far as I know, we don't have a ton of contact with other people. But I mean, these stations are hundreds of kilometers apart or hundreds of miles apart. So
really depends on the project. So
Sure.
scientists
About the
coming,
rings project.
if they are part of the international project, just like rings, as you mentioned, are shared funding and shared international effort. So depending on the scientific project, we do have a lot of connection between scientists internationally. But right at the moment here, the scientists who are working at the station work on their own here on their project, and then the data are being shared later.
Thank you.
Thank you. Another question? Yes, please.
How much actual equipment is being run in like seasons being monitored?
You might need to repeat.
Could you hear
repeat
that?
Well, let's have Max repeat it because I think you're too
What was
far
your
away.
question? I didn't quite hear you.
Which-
How much equipment is being run in the off season and monitored?
that's for my Adrian.
Okay.
So
So basically, the few SCADA screens you saw, we have VPN connections from Belgium, and so we are able to basically use the exact same software in Belgium. The connection is very slow, so when we move the mouse, we see it blocked around the screen. It's very painful to use, but we can basically do the same stuff we do here on our computer. We can do exactly the same in Belgium, thanks to an internet connection that runs all the time, all the year.
I think he specifically mentioned the science projects. I was wondering about the science projects.
Yeah, so same. So when scientists have equipment connected to the station, they usually have computers connected to the network in which they store their data, and they also receive a VPN connection, and so they are able to use those computers remotely from Europe or whatever, and they can do the exact same operations they would do on these computers in Antarctica. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you. After one final question in the group. Yes, please.
What was like your most expensive part, like equipment or like construction or anything of like this whole PPA project?
Did you hear that? What was the most expensive piece of equipment from the project? EA project.
For you talking for the station or for a specific research project?
The station. For the station.
I think the complete cost, overall cost of this station being built was what, 20 million euros?
25 million.
25 million, which is actually, I think, yeah, that was the total cost of the station being constructed. I know some of the bigger machinery that we use to go into the field, like the Prinos, those are quite expensive. I think those cost about 250,000 euros for one. That's pretty steep. Benoit mentioned the satellite dish. I have no idea how much that costs though.
Well, just we sometimes break a single server because of static electricity, and then you're quickly looking at a cost of 20,000 euro for if we have to replace a couple of those.
But yeah, I guess the most expensive thing were probably just some of the bigger snow machines that we use to traverse to the coast. Most of because it's very expensive to fly anything into Antarctica. Really, the big bulky cargo comes via ship. So pretty much every season, part of our team drives roughly the 200 kilometers down to the coast and drags the big bulky equipment back on big sleds, which can carry an entire cargo shipping containers. So yeah, I mean, those snow machines are pretty pricey.
Thanks, Simon. We really appreciate your t-shirt as well.
We mentioned that earlier. Yeah, I wore this, my favorite t-shirt.
Yeah, all right.